Today I'm going to really talk about what's taking place more from a macro perspective around the world. What's happening into the business environment that we have, and what's taking place that's really enabling today to see reusable packaging as the way to pursue transport packaging. Looking at reusable systems to help solve some of the greatest problems that we face, but also identify what those areas of opportunity are with today. So I'm hoping to kind of paint a broad picture, but tie it together that really shows how reusable packaging is indeed today's way, and really the future way of how packaging should be used throughout the supply chains. The fact is that we're living in very turbulent times today. I've identified several issues that are always top of mind for us as citizens in the country, but also because our businesses are starting to be real impacted with these particular items, from climate change to solid waste, how we manage materials, growing populations that are ultimately impacting the consumable side of our business. There's a lot of things that are ultimately driving forces behind changes in the way that we operate as a business, changes in the way that we're distributing products to our customers. And I wanted to touch on a little bit of each to show that these forces are indeed having an impact on our businesses and the packaging that we choose to be able to ship our products. Real briefly, climate change certainly heads the list and things that we see as headlines on a day-to-day basis. And this is, there we go. Basically, there's a lot of research and science evidence that has come out with the United Nations report that says that if we achieve global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial levels, that we're subjecting our planet to significant catastrophic changes. Right now we're at already 1 degree above. So if we just accelerate the global warming an additional half a degree Celsius or 0.9 Fahrenheit, that we can expect tens of millions of people to face significant challenges associated to their life. Coastal systems that become flooded, agricultural lands that are no longer harvestable, for example. Changes in the way that we live, just with a small degree of temperatures, could be a difference between whether we have coral reefs in our oceans or not. So it's definitely a cause for alarm, and this is where reusable packaging comes in, because an effective system has proven to show that it really reduces the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted into the system. When you're able to reuse a product, extend its useful life and value, not have to remanufacture it or to pull resources to build it, that you can drive down carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions associated with the movement of the product. In the United States, 42% of the greenhouse gas emissions are associated with how we make and ship and dispose of products. So the idea of transporting products, and certainly how we make and build and handle at the end of life, has a significant contributions to greenhouse gas emissions. So whatever we can in terms of reuse to reduce that certainly is going to be an advantage as we're looking to reduce the impact that we have with climate change. And solid waste is another. We continue to accumulate more trash. And they project that by 2050, there's going to be 70% more trash, solid waste accumulated around the world. So as developing nations, as population continues, we can only expect to have more solid waste trash in which we have to work with and manage. Keep in mind that about 30% of the trash is packaging in one shape or another. So packaging has really one of the largest pieces of solid waste that is being contributed out there. And we look at package, what can we do with packaging to prevent that solid waste from occurring? And of course, reuse, allowing it to be kept into the system. So what can we do in the world to be able to address the amount of waste that we're being accumulated? The United States is responsible for 20% of the solid waste trash that's being accumulated annually, yet we're 4% of the world's population. So even here domestically in the United States, there's a lot of work to be done to reduce the amount of trash that's being generated and ultimately having to be managed either landfilled or recycled. Pollution. We all see the stories with the sea turtle, and see the images with the plastic bag around. It's really fired up a lot of folks on how we need to address the amount of waste and pollution that's occurring in our oceans. 8 million tons of plastic enter the ocean every year. Continues to be a major problem. Around the world, there are 1 million plastic beverage bottles that are sold every minute. In the United States, 2.5 million plastic beverage bottles are thrown away every hour. And the number continues to grow. Yet in the United States, we only recover and recycle about 29% of those plastic beverage bottles. So while we talk about consumer packaging, certainly the problems we have with consumer waste in beverage bottles, for example, the same applies with reusable products and products that we make for single use for transport packaging, right? We need systems in place to be able to recover these and reuse these instead of leaving the system and not being able to be properly recovered and managed to avoid for the pollution. And that's where having that system of reuse come in could really drive an impact associated with problems with what's being exposed into the environment. But recycling is not the answer. Even experts in the recycling industry would tell you that recycling alone is not going to solve the problem. In fact, today, when China last year implemented their national sword policy, rejecting basically the import of waste and garbage coming in that they would be using for recycling for energy and fuel within their country. They have said, stop, we're no longer accepting the world's garbage, in which they were 45% of the world's scrap material was actually going to China. And they put an end to that pretty much overnight, immediately. In fact, U.S. scrap material going to China was our sixth largest export that we have as a country, was our waste going to China. So it was a big business. We'll package up all the recycled materials and scrap, and we'll send them to China, and they'll deal with it. No more. So you're seeing that impact take place in the recycling industry, where now they've got a lot of material with no place to go. There isn't the end market to be able to support all the recycling materials, for example. The largest recycling company in the state of California recently closed. 284 of their recycling plants have shut down. It's just not a sustainable business in the way that the recycling industry is set up today. Recycling is not the answer. It's an important part of the answer. It needs to be part of that system. We need to focus more on reuse of these products so they don't have to go and to be managed into a recycling center immediately. At the end of life, sure, but maybe that's after 100, 200 uses in which we're gaining a lot of value associated with it. Okay, population is something that we know it's coming. 2 billion more people are expected to join us within the next 30 years around the world. So that's only going to add more fuel in terms of how we consume products, how we manage the waste that as a result. So we need to be aggressive and anticipate what's taking place with population change. One of the big trends is the density of our cities. So in the United States, 80% of our population live in urban areas around major cities. Around the world, it's actually growing pretty significantly, where 60% of citizens around the world are congregating around the cities. So the cities, as we know, for our daily commutes, is gaining a lot of population. The infrastructure is not there to support it, and including how we're moving products into those dense areas. We need to be smarter about systems of moving packaged products and the removal of those products. That if we keep accumulating waste, we're going to see our streets lined with products sitting out there ready for recycling, in which there's no recycled home for it. We need to think about reusable systems, especially in some of our urban dense areas. That's where reusable packaging can come in. Resource conservation. The way we consume materials these days, the Earth cannot replenish what we consume. This is a calculation that is devised that basically shows in a calendar year that this year, July 29th, was the last day of the year in which we were consuming resources that the Earth can replenish itself. So every bit of natural resource that we're extracting from July 29th on, we're borrowing. And right now it takes about 1.75 Earths to be able to replenish what we consume from natural resources. We've got to stop being a resource-consuming society, and when we do consume those resources into our products, that we've got to be able to reuse them over and over again and break that link in terms of utilizing resources for our product packaging, for our product consumption as well. When you look at the political world, they are starting to mobilize around some of these great Earth challenges that we have. Europe has been out in front, actually passing legislation that looks to set targets for recycling, targets for source reduction. There's inroads into doing that here in the United States. California was this close about a week ago of passing legislation that would have been really sweeping in terms of new regulatory scope around packaging in the state of California. There's initiatives that are being built around with legislation and policy to be able to curb problems that we have with solution. These are things that we need to continue to support for a lot of the problems that we've addressed, but looking at ways that they can also help promote more source reduction of our products, including reuse. Remember, when you've got your reduce, reuse, recycle, your source reduction in terms of eliminating waste is your reduce and your reuse. Your recycling is really, in essence, an efficient way of managing waste that's already created. So we need to have these policy tools to be able to reflect a lot of these priorities in which reuse is going to allow us to tackle some of these big challenges that we have. And economics is the last piece here. You've got a lot of venture capitalists, a lot of funding, a lot of money that's basically saying we need to make sure you've got sustainability plans to address climate change. A lot of the big money and the venture capitalists are basically requiring these sustainability plans. They recognize from an investment standpoint that companies need to be forward thinking in terms of material use and packaging. So the economies, the investments, the money is starting to follow, and how sustainability needs to be a part of a business. Well, I want to touch on four major transitions that are taking place in favor of reuse. So we've got all these issues, we've got these macro forces that are shaping the landscape of how packaging is being used. Well, how are those transitions are taking place within the actual business in the company? These are more high-level transitions I just thought I would capture here as a way to start thinking about reusable packaging. First is design. Design is the critical component ultimately to the intent of what you're delivering with your packaging, with your product. The transition is going from disposability to durability. That is a major trend that we're starting to look at in terms of our products that are being manufactured, how we're delivering value in the supply chain with our packaging. And that gone are the single-use, one-use, throw-away culture, and moving to things that we're building to last, building that have properties that are much greater than the packaging alone. And one example comes from a new initiative called Loop that's looking at reusable packaging for consumer products. They've gained a lot of headlines, they've gained a lot of popularity with brands. I think you're going to see more of reuse going to the household level. But Tom Sasky with TerraCycle really pinpointed it well when he talked about how with durability you get a lot more benefits. You can build more value-added components and features with your packaging products than what normal single-use disposable products do. That's the same thing with reusable packaging, whether it's pallets, containers, bins. If you're designing for durability, you can add more feature-rich content associated with those products that are going to drive more value and drive more benefits. So the transition from disposability to durability actually becomes a very important element in what we're doing and what we're delivering on with reusable packaging products. So, carrying that theme, the first reaction of a lot of companies when they want to become more sustainability is how can we use less material? right? How can we lightweight our materials? We'll take plastic out, and then we can report that we achieved 30% reduction in material use because we made our products lighter. So we have now our water bottles that are real flimsy, right? And you can almost fold them as an accordion. You've got our packaging products that are starting to build pallets that are very unstable. That's not the right way to approach it. Yeah, it's always good for source reduction, but again, you're losing the opportunity of designing for durability and value, and lightweighting is certainly not the intent. In fact, one of the examples is that they've made these bottles so light that they're no longer working in the recycling system. They're no longer being sorted right within the automation equipment, and so therefore we're losing the problem of recycling them to begin with. So there's a cause and effect here, but lightweighting, source reduction, having less single-use disposable product is not the answer. The second transition is more of the economic model, and you've all heard about the circular economy. It's a rapidly growing popular notion that we need to basically have growth decoupled from resource consumption, that you can achieve economic growth without being a consumption linear-based system. So the transfer of a take, make, waste linear process that we've lived and actually optimized over the last few decades is now transitioning to something that's more restorative, more regenerative, where the circular economy based on principles of designing out waste, extending the life and value of our materials, and restoring natural ecosystems. With those three principles, with a circular economy, we can achieve more and help address a lot of the problems that we talked about earlier. When you look at a lineup of the difference between the linear economy and circular, the linear is basically single use and try and recover and recycle as much as you can. With the circular economy, it's extending the value, eliminating waste of the system, reusing as that first step, refurbishing, repairing, keeping materials in use as long as possible. And then when all else fails, then recycling is there to make sure that waste is not being used and not being generated, and those materials can be used for the manufacture of all products. But in many people today, when you ask them, yes, we're pursuing a circular economy. You've seen this, a lot of companies have come out, we're interested in the circular economy, we're pursuing it, but it's not a sustainability initiative. The circular economy is an economic model. In fact, the leading foundation, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, leading the circular economy movement, sustainability does not appear on their website. This is about economic growth and opportunity. That's what's missing out in the conversation, is a lot of companies, a lot of leaders are saying, yes, we're pursuing circular economy because we want to be more sustainable. That's a good result, but the circular economy has many more benefits and economic impact associated with it. That's the growth of a circular economy. So sustainability and a lot of those features of material management, those are some of the offshoots to the circular economy, but don't miss the big picture of what it means to extend the life and value of products that you have. Third is the transition from a low-cost system to value creation in your supply chain. So again, it's not having a supply chain that can we achieve the lowest cost possible and take inputs. Think differently about having a system that's creating value for all of the trading partners within the supply chain. It's there for the taking. Durability allows you to build products that are more compatible, that stack better through transportation, that build unit loads taller to fill out to those trucks, that have ventilation properties for airflow and cooling to help reduce food spoilage and waste. These are values that can be achieved all the way through the supply chain, and it's not about lowest cost. It's about creating opportunity. That's what reusable packaging does, because you can build that durability, you can build for those features within the supply chain. And this is just an example of a reusable packaging model of really trying to keep all of your assets flowing here and minimizing the amount of inputs that you have in your system. So that's what we want to achieve, basically, is having that consistent purpose of our reusable packaging products within that system of material management. And finally, technology. Maybe one of the most impactful transitions that we have of going from manual operations more to automated environments. It's having technology that allows us to be better managers of our assets. Maybe implementing our technologies to be smarter, intelligent packaging units that have sensors attached that can tell us about the temperature, the conditions, and the vibrations of our product as it moves real time throughout the supply chain. It's using technology to really drive those benefits with reusable packaging and moving from more manual processes and operations to automation with robotics working with reusable packaging that's designed for suit. Here's where we're definitely going to have technology as the enabler of reuse. Reuse works today. The technology up to this point has been an incredible addition associated with how we're managing materials, but the best is yet to come. As we look at the 5G networks, the Internet of Things, better applications with RFID technology, we're really at the forefront of how we can apply this technology to reusable packaging systems to generate data that's going to allow for decision making across business operations all the way through the supply chain. Consumer preferences, inventory management, quality assurance. These are benefits that are going to come when we equip technology to our reusable packaging assets because they're designed for durability, they're designed for last. You wouldn't put that same investment into a product that's going to get thrown away and ultimately, hopefully, recycled as well down the road. This is an exciting frontier that we're going to be addressing as an industry. And last week we issued a white paper as a kind of a starting point that you can download off our website at reusables.org. It's free. Download the white paper. It's a pretty extensive document, but we're laying the groundwork ultimately for the industry to start looking and showing about how technology is going to be that enabler for more reusable packaging systems and drive that value proposition associated with your use of reusable packaging. In the end, what I wanted to deliver on this with this presentation is that the world conditions today are really not only requiring better solutions, but the best solutions. We shouldn't be settling for that next level of sustainability, focusing solely on recycling. As you saw with the circular economy, recycling is that outer loop, the last resort. So the more that we start looking at recycling, the circular economy is not recycling on steroids. It's the last element. So we need to start looking at investments of the best sustainability options, source reduction, reuse. This is ultimately going to drive sustainable management practices and allow us to contribute to a lot of environmental solutions that we can offer in terms of climate change and waste and pollution and resource conservation. Reuse has answers to all of those. So taken together, it really becomes today's way for the future of our business and our earth, of what we're achieving as companies. Businesses will survive and thrive in the circular economy. You can count on it because it's smart management of materials. There are significant economic value propositions associated with businesses in the circular economy. That's why it's taking off. It's the aha moment that it's more about than just about sustainability. The economic benefits, the growth, the data capture, the automation, looking to extend value, creating the value for customers. There's a lot there, and that's where reuse is setting ourselves up, that reusable products and systems will be delivering on those value propositions and helping us solve some of those greatest challenges that the earth has. We're really at the forefront of using reuse as a way to achieve great things associated with supply chain distribution of our goods. And it is truly then today's way of how we transport packaging. Our organization is the trade association for the reusable packaging industry. So thank you very much for allowing us to talk a little bit about reusable packaging today and how these major forces and trends are basically setting the stage for more reuse of packaging, optimization of these systems, and ultimately take us to a level where our businesses are thriving with sustainability initiatives that are delivering significant economic benefit.